You're listening to Myers-Briggs Question Corner with Edythe Richards. Hello listeners, David here, producer of Myers-Briggs Question Corner. Today is a very special episode. It's number 100. We launched on the 15th of October 2018, originally with 9 episodes, and we've been weekly since November 2018. So to reach 100 episodes is a huge milestone, not only from a production point of view, but it's a huge personal accomplishment too. And with the sheer number of other podcasts out there, it's quite a testament to our regular listeners and subscribers that you've all continued to tune in. So thank you very much. Edythe, did you think we'd reach this point of 100 episodes?
Hello listeners, and hello David. Well, I can't say that I was thinking that far ahead in terms of numbers of episodes when we first started this journey. As you all know, if you've been tuning in for a while, I just love talking, and I love talking about the Myers-Briggs and personality, and to be able to combine all of that into a weekly podcast that we bring to people around the world, I'm just pleased to be able to do that and that you all enjoy it as much as you do. We've gotten some really great questions from our listeners, and I'm going to highlight a few of those today. And I think it's also a good time to highlight some of our episodes that were the most popular. And there's some interesting information that we can share with you all in terms of topics that seem to resonate with you the most. So I'm really excited to be talking about that too. I also want to give a shout out to a couple of guests we had. But as you know, David, I want to share a fact that many of our listeners may not be aware of. And that's how this series got started and how I really had to convince you to go on this journey with me. You weren't too keen about it at first.
Well, Edythe, you're absolutely right. At the risk of putting myself out there, which you know I don't really like to do, I have to admit that I'm really quite proud of myself for taking on this leap of faith, but I couldn't have done it without your encouragement. This show has given me some really good accomplishments to add to my professional profile. It really has been a huge confidence boost, so thank you.
Well, I was convinced that people would just love your voice, and you sure did resist me on that one. And maybe it's because you're up there in the highlands of Scotland and you hear the same voices all the time without much variety. But let's face it, the rest of the world doesn't always hear a Scottish voice. And I think especially for we Americans, your voice has this melodic quality. And I don't think I'm alone in saying this, but just by you speaking a few sentences or even reading a list, I truly do think that you have the power to captivate people.
Well, I truly appreciate that, Edythe, and I know it's genuine. But being who I am, and I've gone against the grain on this in terms of my personality, it's not a comfortable place for me to be when I'm in the spotlight. So it's quite hard for me to get over that and put my voice out there. But I'm glad I have. And perhaps, in the process, I'd like to think maybe other people could be inspired to take these leaps of faith themselves, whatever it is they're dealing with. And you know, looking back, just getting started, that one small step, was the biggest hurdle. And after I had the courage to get over that one, everything else has really much been fairly simple. I built things up in my mind so much, and things are never as bad as we make them out to be. So that was a really good lesson for me.
Right, I know. Well, I'm glad you're here, David, and I know that you have tons of people out there who enjoy listening to you. But a couple of things that you mentioned really speak to what we're trying to do with this podcast, which is essentially to understand personality in more depth. And we've been vocal about our own personality types and some of the struggles that we've had. And I know you won't mind me saying this because it's something we've talked about offline as well. But you're an INTJ type, David. And a lot of what you just mentioned is really indicative of other INTJs I know as well. There are a couple of episodes we've done, and I'm going to include the links to them in the listening notes, that are specific to INTJs. One that's gotten a lot of downloads is this episode called Why Are INTJs Perceived as Cold or Arrogant?
Yes, I was really in the hot seat in that episode. I talked a lot about we INTJs getting out of our comfort zones. And because that was one of our more popular shows, I'm going to infer that it was helpful to a lot of other INTJs. At least I'd like to think so. My big takeaway from doing that episode is that people more often care about how you make them feel, much more than you're aware. And that's a hard concept for INTJs to grasp, because we are very much about knowledge and truth, and we really have a problem if something is wrong or someone is doing something wrong. I feel like I need to speak up when things are incorrect, and that's what seems to come across as arrogant to other personality types. I've been told this many, many times, and I've ruffled more than a few feathers because of this tendency. Now, I also need to add here that I can't speak for other INTJs, but from what I know, it does seem that this is a common theme for us.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, David, because first, as we've mentioned many times before, there are 16 Myers-Briggs types, and there's a lot of variation within one type. So some of what we may discuss in these episodes rings true to many people, but it certainly won't apply to everyone of that personality type. And since we're talking about INTJ types, there are a couple other episodes we did that seem to be popular, either for other INTJs or maybe even for people who are trying to figure out how to best relate to the INTJ in their lives. We did one on INTJ and INFP communication, and then there was this one on INTJ and ENFP relationships. And obviously that's one of my favorites. This type pairing is known to complement each other on so many levels. And at least for you and me, David, the differences in our types have really helped us to compensate for areas where the other isn't quite as strong. And there's a lot of articles and podcasts out there about how INTJs and ENFPs are often cited as the perfect pairing. But of course, it really depends on the people and the chemistry that they have between them. I think we do a pretty good job of that, though, don't you think?
I do, and I've gotten several compliments from others about the positive interaction between us, so that was really nice to hear. So, putting you on the hot seat, Edythe, you've been quite vocal about your personality type too, and some of the misconceptions around ENFPs. And just by nature of this type itself, have we had any more questions and comments coming in from ENFPs? They seem like one of the types to be the most interested in Myers-Briggs. So I would imagine we get a lot of other ENFPs tuning in.
Yeah, so I have gotten a few questions from ENFPs, yes, and not surprisingly, a lot of those questions revolve around career decision or indecision. One episode that stands out is about ENFPs and entrepreneurs, and it was from an ENFP lady named Pamela. I got a lot of good feedback on that episode and a lot of other ENFPs chiming in saying that they struggle with the very same issues, namely deciding what career to pursue because there's just so many interesting options out there. And this is where we ENFPs can really get ourselves in trouble. I guess the best way to put this is something I've said many times before, and that is that any strength taken to extremes can become a liability. And for we ENFPs, it's our super brainstorming power and ability to come up with this huge laundry list of possible solutions. I really do think that's our superpower, but with too many options, it's easy to become overwhelmed to the point of not being able to act on any of them. So I really encourage other ENFPs out there to tune into that podcast and the one called ENFPs from College to Career. I share some great strategies to get past these obstacles in both of these episodes. Now, there's one other episode I really want to cite here because it's a personal favorite of mine. For one reason, because it was from another ENFP lady named Cecile, and she was all the way from Denmark, and she wrote in with her question. Cecile is in a relationship with an ISFJ man, so she was curious to hear what I had to say about that type pairing. And I sure do have a lot to say about that because my significant other, Richard, is also an ISFJ. And I think the word chaos came up quite a bit during that episode.
Now, Edythe, surely you're not talking about chaotic ENFPs, are you?
Nah, not at all. We're never chaotic. But what you said earlier, David, it reminds me about something I've read repeatedly online about type compatibility. There are certain types that are said to be more compatible, and it's based on type dynamics and the order of the cognitive functions of the Myers-Briggs. So on paper, ISFJs and ENFPs don't work. But I'd say my partner and I work quite well, thank you very much. So there's a lot to be said about the chemistry between individual people. Type theory can't explain everything.
Yes. And we've talked about this before too, Edythe. As an INTJ, I'm very resistant to classifying people, and even believing that this is a science. But I will say this, and this is where I think the critics are wrong about the Myers-Briggs assessment. It has helped me tremendously in understanding my motivations, and as a result of that, it's helped me to work on areas I know I needed to work on. But at the same time, it's normalised a lot of things for me too. But you know, where I think it's been most helpful is in relating to other people. Honestly, I never gave much thought to other people's viewpoints, or why they do the things that they do. I'm a bit ashamed to say that I chalked up some of this psychology stuff as BS, shall we say. This is just the way I am, I've thought more than once. But because I now have a general understanding of people who have personality types different from my own, I like to think that I have a little bit more success in my interactions with them.
Well, I'm truly pleased to hear this, David. I like to think that helping people become more self-aware through learning about personality styles will help in all areas of their lives. But helping interact more effectively with other people is absolutely something I think we can all get better at.
And if I may here, Edythe, one way doing these podcasts with you has really been helpful is in my own relationship. In fact, my partner Teresa appeared as a guest on a couple of our episodes. One of those was Are Perceivers Lazier Than Judgers? And this last dichotomy on the Myers-Briggs can really be a difficult one for a lot of couples to overcome. I know it's been a challenge for us.
Yes, it's been a challenge for me and my relationship as well. So, talking about being chaotic, we perceivers are known for this. When I come home, it's, here comes Hurricane Edythe. And I tell you, as much as I try my darndest to be organized and think everything through and plan ahead, I am just never going to be that person who color codes their underwear drawer. I mean, other than being forced to sit locked in a room creating Excel spreadsheets all day, I can't think of anything I'd hate more.
But we J's keep the world running. Now, don't forget that.
And we P's force you to have fun doing it.
Even if we don't want to have fun.
Oh, you need more fun in your life, face it. But I think that episode on J's and P's, and we've had a few of them, what it boils down to is that judging types need to feel that sense of control a lot more than perceiving types. Perceiving types need freedom more than control.
That's a good way to put it. Although I myself need the freedom to be in control, that's why I can't work for anyone else. But anyway, are there any other episodes that were memorable for you, Edythe?
You know, interestingly enough, a lot of the episodes I thought were really useful were some of the least popular. Thinking and feeling misconceptions, for one. There are just so many misunderstandings that revolve around that dichotomy. A couple more that I'm thinking of included the 3-part series I did on personality and bullying. Are certain personality types more likely to become bullies or to be the victim of bullying? And I'd like to give a shout out now for those episodes because especially when we're talking about adult bullying, which was the focus of the episodes, it's so shameful and it's so underreported and it's so important to the health of the workplace and the health of the team to bring awareness to this issue. Another episode I really enjoyed was the one about Myers-Briggs and Interviewing. In fact, this was a 2-part series as well, and your partner, Teresa, helped us out on that one too. And just because I'm a career counselor, I really appreciate talking about ways to navigate the job search process and help people become more successful in their careers. but it's the relationship podcasts that seem to be the most popular. And I don't think that's really surprising. In fact, the episodes featuring the INFP and INFJ types have been quite popular. I've actually gotten a lot of good feedback on the episode about INFP and ESTJ relationships. And this relationship question was from an INFP woman named Joanna, who was struggling with her ESTJ husband. That episode was quite memorable to me.
Yes, with two opposite types, there are bound to be some challenges. And if I remember correctly, with this couple, a lot revolved around communication.
You know, and that can be the challenge for any couple, regardless of personality type. It's incredibly frustrating when we try so hard to understand each other, but we're just not getting through. Or worse, if we feel like our partner isn't trying as hard to understand us. I can think of a lot of clients I've worked with over the years who have these issues at home and at work too, where the underlying issue really comes down to communication, and it's almost like you're speaking another language. We get so caught up in our own stories and focused on our own point of view that in the moment it's really hard to pause your brain and take a time out or think about what you're saying and what your partner or your coworkers' needs are in that moment. And I think this is something we can all get better at doing. And if we could, I can say that our communication will drastically improve and we'll see a lot of good changes happening.
I'm not arguing with you there, Edythe. But as you said, it's very hard to do these things. And it's even harder when you don't see other people doing them. It's a lot easier to say, oh, he's not trying to understand me, so why should I even bother?
Right, it is hard, but it's something we can do if we choose to do it. And it's all about choice. We want to remember that whatever our personality type is, we choose our behavior.
That really sums things up for what the Myers-Briggs is all about. We are what we are on 4 scales of personality, but at the end of the day, we choose what we want to show to the world. And that's not only about personality, but sheer will or desire. Emotional intelligence is what you would say, Edythe. And speaking of emotional intelligence, this might be a good time to tell our listeners about our next project.
Right, this is the perfect time to announce it. We're in pre-production for a new series called EQ at Work. And as much as I love the Myers-Briggs, I equally, if not more, love the emotional intelligence assessment. And we're hearing a lot about emotional intelligence, or EQ as I call it, in the workplace, especially right now in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. Just by virtue of my career path helping people in their careers and at work, I can speak to the fact that we often pay a lot of attention to tangible things. And these days, that's masks and hand sanitizer and staying 6 feet apart, things like that. And then there's data and numbers and revenue. But we often neglect the intangible things. And that's where emotional intelligence comes into play. And that very word, emotion or emotions, conjures up a lot of negativity. Most often what I hear is emotions have no place at work. And my counter argument is that emotions drive everything you do at work and in life, whether you're aware of them or not. And like a lot of skills, emotional intelligence, and it is a skill, is most obvious when it's absent.
Yes. Edythe, I'm very excited about working with you again on this project. Can you tell our listeners anything about what you're envisioning in terms of the format, or when you're expecting to launch?
Well, in terms of the format, I want to bring stories of real people, inspirational people who have used different aspects of emotional intelligence to succeed professionally or personally. And I want to bring quick and easy tips to our listeners for improving their own emotional intelligence. I'd really like to see people master their emotions so that their emotions don't get in the way of what they're trying to do. And way too often, our emotions do get in the way, and much of the time we don't even realize it. But I really do think that by understanding that emotions do drive our behavior and impact other people both positively and negatively, learning strategies to manage them better, I honestly do believe if we can do this, we'll see better results in our lives. So I'm really pleased to be putting all this together. And in terms of when we'll release our first episode, I think you can speak better to that than I can, David.
I guess that's true. Well, the sooner the better. But we really do want to make a good product here, and that's going to take a little bit of time. So let's ask all our listeners to bear with us. But do check out our website, eqatwork.net. Not .com, eqatwork.net. We've set this website up specifically for the content of that show.
Oh, and speaking of websites, we have a site where our listeners can download all past episodes of Myers-Briggs Question Corner and our other series, Midlife Career Changers. Is it okay to share this one, David?
Yes, now's a great time. It's mbtipodcast.com. mbtipodcast.com. So yes, please check us out. And we'd really appreciate you giving us a share on social media, especially LinkedIn. Is that right, Edythe?
Yes, would love to be connected to you on LinkedIn, and please do tag me if you share any of these episodes. I just like to see your faces. I don't get enough new faces these days.
Well, hopefully we won't be living in this COVID vacuum forever. But Edythe, we're coming to the end of another episode. So a few points I want to leave our listeners with. The website, mbtipodcast.com. Check us out there. Follow us on your favourite podcast platform. And please, give us a review if you like the content. Follow Edythe on LinkedIn if you don't already. And Edythe is available for consultation too. Edythe, could you mention a little bit more about that before we go?
Yes, if you're actively job searching or thinking about changing careers, this is what I do. I help people through these transitions, and I'm a certified professional resume writer. I've worked with hundreds of job seekers over the years, so please do reach out if you're interested in working with me. And obviously, I administer assessments, mainly Myers-Briggs and Emotional Intelligence, and if you're interested in consulting with me on either of those, I'd love to hear from you.
And you can find Edythe at atopcareer.com. Edythe, thank you so much. This has truly been a fascinating discussion and a trip down memory lane too.
And thank you, David, for all your expertise and for lending your voice to this series. We've had a lot of great fun, haven't we? And I think we've impacted a lot of people for the better.
Oh, indeed, I would love to think so. And we're not going anywhere, folks, though our content might not be as regular from now on. If you have a question related to personality or the Myers-Briggs type indicator, continue to get in touch, and we'll be glad to feature your question on an upcoming episode. I'm David, producer of this series, signing off. Until next time. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you'd like to hear more, or you'd like to submit a question yourself, then you can find us at www.atopcareer.com. Until next time. MBTI and Myers-Briggs are registered trademarks of the MBTI Trust.